Well, that was another rough one. A loss in Portland to the Blazers, 108-102. More of the same offensively from the Kings as what we saw against Orlando. Just felt super disconnected. It feels like they still have no idea what they're doing. It still feels like they're a team without much point guard play. Pretty chaotic. Still feels like a team that's just playing unbalanced lineups, whether that's lineups without point guard play or having a starting lineup that just isn't good defensively. It's not like defense was the biggest problem in this game, but down the stretch it became the biggest problem. It was just such an odd game because for the first 3 quarters, the offense was pretty bad. DeRozan was getting nothing, and it felt like the game kind of slowed down when DeRozan had the ball and the Kings weren't playing super fast with him and the ball was kind of sticking, and it was kind of sticking with everyone, but mainly DeRozan, and he couldn't get anything going offensively. He had some assists, but he couldn't really get anything. And then in the fourth quarter, DeMar does his thing and turns up in the fourth quarter. But that's when nobody on the Kings down the stretch could stay in front of anyone. And so pretty much what I've taken away from this is Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray need to close games together. And maybe Jake LaRavia comes in and he's great and he could be thrown into that equation as well if you need someone with more size. But it sure seems like Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray need to close games. Because to close this game, there was not much defense being played. And then the offense was kind of just like, if DeMar scores, then cool. And if he doesn't, then I don't know what we're doing. And so really, it feels like we're at the point where it's like, okay, must starts, Keon, Keegan, Sabonis, and then figure it out from there. I don't know. The Kings, they're in a tough position. Look, I think they'll play better than this. I think they're going to get a practice in, and maybe when we hit the All-Star break, they'll have some time to figure things out. But the thing is, the Kings don't have time here in the Western Conference. You don't have time. You just got to win games. And so the Kings need to get it together right now, primarily offensively. That's not to say there aren't defensive problems. There are, and that's why I think you need to end games with Keon Ellis. But this team is built for offense, and so if you're only scoring 102 points and the defense and the offense looks as discombobulated as it did, then you're just probably not going to win many games here. And so I still expect it to get better, and I'm still not trying to overreact to just 2 straight losses here. We still have another player that's going to come in from the trade deadline. Jonas Valanciunas just got here. This is only Zach LaVine's second game. Like, the Kings could get it together, but they need to get it together like right now. They just don't have much time here. And they're just in such an odd position because the obvious guy to take out of the starting lineup is DeRozan, and you put in Keon Ellis. And I say that because obviously you're not taking out Keegan or Sabonis. I don't think you take out Monk because he's the ball handler. And you just don't take out LaVine, maybe because he's making like $50 million a year. And also you kind of traded the face of the franchise for him, but also just because of his shooting and what we know he can do, scoring the ball. But then at the same time, when it comes down to it in the fourth quarter, you can't have DeRozan out of the game. You have to have him in the game. You just have to. So it does put the Kings in a tough spot, but I just really think Doug Christie needs to make a big decision here. He needs to make a decision to bench one of his big scorers. I mean, late in games, I think he just needs to be able to make that decision. This is his opportunity. This is Doug Christie's opportunity to be a head coach, and he's got to make the decision to get this team to mesh together and to balance these lineups. And so he's got to be able to make decisions to end the game, to close the game with the correct lineups to be able to win. Early on in this game, it was just so clear that DeRozan was the weak link defensively. Portland just targeted him relentlessly. Relentlessly. It was, in my opinion, by far his worst defensive game of the season. I don't think he boxed out one guy. Portland just constantly crashed from the corners, running right by him. And he couldn't stay in front of anybody. He started out the game just not closing out on anybody. And he was guarding Deni Avdija. And Deni Avdija was just getting wide open looks from 3. Whoever DeMar was guarding was going to get open looks. And then later in the game, when he kind of started to close out on defenders, then they were just blowing by him. I mean, he just had the worst defensive game. I don't expect a lot from him defensively, but this was too bad. I understand he's not going to be a good defender, but he cannot be this bad. It really feels like it lost us the game, how bad DeRozan was defensively. And the problems defensively were also on the defensive glass. The rebounding battle did end up even, but it felt like Portland was getting a lot of offensive rebounds. They ended up with 10. And so many times, Portland was driving, getting into the lane, going up against Sabonis. And Sabonis had what I thought was one of his best defensive performances of the season. He was like an elite rim protector in there. He stopped so many guys at the rim. But the problem was then there was no help. He would stop someone at the rim, and then no one's there to get the rebound. And then once Portland got the rebound, the Kings just felt slow to match up and to rotate. Whenever Portland got into the middle, they would find a way to break the Kings down. There were some good possessions early on in this first quarter where it felt like the Kings kind of were rotating a bit better and had a little bit more energy, especially compared to the Magic game. But then they could just never close those possessions out because it was always just one guy getting lost. And a lot of times that guy was DeMar. Offensively, Keegan and Monk started off pretty fast. They both had 6 points pretty early on. Keegan got it by cutting inside. A nice putback slam in transition. Also took it all the way himself in transition and had a really nice move. I don't know if it was a Euro step. It was something. I'm not sure what it was. I'm not sure I've ever seen it before, but it was a good move. And he finished. And Monk just had 2 3-pointers, which is always a good sign. One of them was the first play of the game drawn up for him to get a 3. And we've seen that play a few times now in the past couple of games. And then another one was just a sidestep off the dribble. That was a tough shot. Then LaVine got it going a little bit. He had a nice take to the rim, playing off Sabonis, faking a pass to Sabonis, and then taking it all the way to rim. He also had a tough corner 3. DeMar was making some good passes, especially from the mid post. His playmaking was good. He was getting some assists. But then once Zach LaVine and Keegan went out, those were the first 2 substitutions. And that's different than what we saw against Orlando. Against Orlando, we pulled Monk early on. This time Monk stayed in, but when LaVine and Keegan went out, then the first few possessions, DeRozan was handling the ball. It wasn't Monk handling the ball. And those possessions just felt so slow. It just felt like nothing was really happening. And that's what you're going to get if you're asking DeRozan to be your primary ball handler. But through the first 6 minutes, it was pretty back and forth, pretty even. Then the Kings went to a zone. And the zone didn't go very well because Shaedon Sharpe just was a menace attacking this. I mean, Shaedon Sharpe, this dude is really good. And he's coming off the bench. And this Portland team is kind of a shame because you have some really nice young pieces coming off the bench. Start Shaedon Sharpe. He always kills the Kings, 24 points. And he beat the zone by just catching it on the wing and just stampede driving straight into the paint. And he was also hitting the outside shot. He was knocking down his 3s early on, and Portland in general was just knocking down their 3s. And within that zone, the Kings, once someone got into the paint, that's when it kind of felt like it was over for the Kings when they were in that zone. They were just getting lost. We did have a really interesting sequence. I was going to say a really nice sequence. It was a nice sequence, but an interesting one from Keon Ellis, where he turns it over, then gets a steal. Or I don't think they counted it as a steal. I think they counted it as a Sabonis block. Sabonis played really nice defense, but Keon came up with it, and then he pushes it down the court. I think it was Lyles that got it. DeMar fed Lyles, and Lyles gets like blocked at the rim. And then Portland tries to push it up again, and Keon just steals it right back. Gets it back to DeMar. DeMar back to Lyles for the dunk. It's like a second try. But that's the thing with Keon. He makes some mistakes, and then he just immediately makes up for it. And then we got to see the new addition towards the end of the first quarter, Jonas Valanciunas. He came in, and he was just firing away. He immediately hit a midi in the pick and roll with LaVine, and so that started out well, where it felt like, okay, LaVine, he's got like a pick and roll partner here that maybe he likes. He hits Valanciunas on the baseline, and he hits that midi. Then Val got another 2 shots up. Maybe not the greatest shots, but the Kings offense kind of wasn't going anywhere. And then Devin Carter drove into the lane, misses at the rim. Valanciunas gets the offensive rebound and draws the foul. So it was just like he comes in and you notice him. He was there. But I was enjoying the experience. I was liking, I feel like your first game, you're allowed to just like get those shots up, you know? I like that he was being aggressive coming off the bench. And I think he did paired nicely with LaVine in a little bit of that pick and roll. And I felt like LaVine got kind of comfortable. But I will say with LaVine, sometimes it feels like he's one speed. You know, he's just attacking so hard. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's why he's not going to be your primary ball handler. But LaVine definitely looked better in this one. He was hitting some nice fallaways, hit one to start the second quarter. But the Kings, they just started missing shots at the rim. Keegan missed a little short jumper. Valanciunas missed one that went all the way down and then out. Keon missed at the rim. And then the Kings were trying to finish over Klingon, or they were trying to get their floaters and little short mid-rangers to go, and they couldn't get those to go over Klingon. Devin Carter had some nice moments to start the second quarter where he drew a charge and he drew an offensive foul on a moving screen. But offensively, he wasn't good. There was no cohesion offensively. And it felt like we just didn't know what to do. It's like, should we run dribble handoff with Valanciunas up top? Should we have him come and set a screen in a pick and roll? Are we just posting up Valanciunas? Like everything involved Valanciunas. But it felt like we were just kind of trying everything, seeing what worked. Like there was really no cohesion. We did see a lot more Keegan Murray offensively today. I mean, he started out with a quick 6 points, and he was letting the jumper go. He missed his first 3 jumpers, 2 threes and a mid-ranger. But then he started getting them to go, and his 3-point shot was looking good. And he went 2 for 4 from 3, 5 for 10 from the field. He was getting them up. I liked the looks he was getting in the first half. And then in the second half, it just kind of, I don't even know if he got a shot. Like, that's kind of the common theme with Keegan here. But that's not really on Keegan. Like, where were his opportunities in the second half? And that's where the Kings are just kind of a mess offensively and don't really know what they're doing at times when they're just kind of taking turns going isolation, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Malik Monk. It's like that never involves Keegan, and they don't have this like great distributor at the point guard to get him balls. And so it really just is the connection with Sabonis is where he's going to get his shot attempts. And he was letting them fly on those dribble handoffs, and that's what you want to see. And it was looking good in the first half, but then we just didn't see it at all in the second half. I will say I did like the Kings' defense. They had some really nice moments. In that second quarter, they had some really nice rotations, some really nice switches. Monk had a great possession guarding Anthony Simons, blocked him, took it the other way in transition, and drew a foul. And it was super important to get that pace up. But for as many of those possessions where the Kings were rotating really well and would come up with a big stop, then there would be another possession where a Blazer would get the ball and hold the ball for a long time, and all the Kings would just kind of stand there and stare at him and not match up. The amount of times where the Kings were kind of disorganized, but then the Blazers would just hold the ball, give them the chance to reorganize, and they just wouldn't, and they would just stand there looking at the ball. And I do think you can pin quite a lot of this on DeRozan not matching up. Like, they just were not getting out to guys on the three-point line, and that's why the Blazers shot really well in the first half from 3. And especially Anthony Simons, who was just coming around screens, and the Kings were not stepping up on them. You also just had Scoot Henderson come in and knock down 2 threes, and I was like, come on, that's just another Franz Wagner moment here. And by the way, the Magic shot like under 20% from 3 in their game against the Nuggets tonight, which is cool. But then offensively, Monk had a really bad turnover, and there were definitely some not so great moments from Monk running the offense. But then again, the Kings went through a stretch where Malik Monk missed a layup, DeMar DeRozan missed a layup back to back. Sabonis missed a tip and a layup, but he did just stay after it and get the rebound and get it to DeMar, who got an and one. But there were just so many moments where the Kings were just sloppy or holding on to the ball or just couldn't dribble the ball properly or were just making bad passes. And I'm like, is this really what it looks like without a point guard? Like, you just can't dribble the ball properly. You can't make these simple passes. Like, there was just so many moments of sloppiness. Like, some of that, you just got to kind of take accountability as a player. And it's like, it's not because we lack point guards on this roster. Like, you just have to be better. But Keegan had a couple of threes there, one of them to tie the game, but then Anthony Simons just answers right back on the other end because the Kings went zone, and he just goes to the wing and hits a three, and that was a problem against the Kings zone. The Blazers would just get Anthony Simons or Shaedon Sharpe to the wing and would either knock down a three or catch the ball, and before the defender got there would just drive right by. And the Kings just couldn't stay in front of anyone. Domantas Sabonis was doing great work to try to keep the defense together, and he did keep the defense together. He stopped so many guys at the rim, but the perimeter defense was pretty bad. The Kings were grinding though, like Keegan, Keon, Domas, they were all just making these hustle plays. The offense lived at the free throw line. They shot 16 for 45 from the field in the first half, but were still right in it, only down 4, because they were getting after it, getting on the offensive glass, getting to the free throw line. To start the third quarter, Sabonis knocks down a 3. Sabonis had another great moment protecting the rim, but again, like, nobody's rebounding. DeMar not boxing out. There was another play where Sabonis stopped Jeremy Grant at the rim, and that led to a Zach LaVine transition 3 for a 2-point lead. And the one thing I will say, Zach LaVine, when he was spotted up in the corners, getting good looks, he was knocking them down. And so he went 3 for 9 from 3. That's not great. He took a lot of tough threes. But when he was just spotting up and they were clean looks, he was knocking them down with ease. And so the Kings just need to be able to run better offense, and that will result in better looks for him. Then the officiating in that second half was rough. I will say there were just some soft calls on the Kings, whereas the Blazers were allowed to be a little more physical on the perimeter without any fouls. And Sabonis and Keegan both picked up 3 fouls pretty early on in the third quarter. The call on Keegan was really rough. Then Sabonis got called for his 4th on a moving screen. And so, as great as Sabonis had been defensively, he, first of all, wasn't getting much offensively. And, I mean, that just comes down to the Kings' offense being pretty stalled out for most of the game. Sabonis is a guy that gets all his in the flow of the offense pretty much. And so when that's not happening, then he's living off second chance points, which he did get inside and get to the free throw line, especially off offensive rebounds. But that's pretty much all where his points were coming from. The Blazers did cool down in that third quarter. That helped the Kings out a ton. And having Valanciunas definitely helped, where it was the first test of Sabonis being in foul trouble, and you have this other big that you can go to and hopefully be confident in when Sabonis is on the bench. You had LaVine with a really nasty fake into a reverse layup. He's really good at that exact move where, you know, he pump fakes as he's running, kind of the Harrison Barnes move, except a lot faster than how Harrison Barnes does it. Then you had DeMar and Monk coming off Valanciunas screens, knocking down middies. Portland was throwing some pretty rough passes, and the Kings were up 1. Then Keon hit a 3. Kings got a stop. Monk with a great pass to Keon in transition for the dunk, and the Kings went up 6. And I'm pretty sure 6 was their biggest lead of the game. The game got super fast, super chaotic towards the end of the third quarter. There were definitely some good moments. Valanciunas hit a hook shot, had a massive rebound against Klingon. Keon Ellis forced a jump ball on a Jeremy Grant drive where he just helped and grabbed the ball. He's so good at that. You also had LaVine hitting a late clock midi. But then there were some more rough moments, like Devin Carter got in the game, and he immediately, there was just this weird interaction where he was in the corner and Valanciunas is coming over to set a screen, but Carter just like doesn't take the screen and then just cuts inside for like no reason. And LaVine drives inside at that moment, beats his man, but then Devin Carter's just like sitting in the lane for no reason, and it just clogs everything up. Devin Carter was really rough offensively. Like, he was making some nice defensive plays, got a steal, and drew 2 offensive fouls, but man, is the offense rough. And the defense was not as good down the stretch of the third quarter. Let Portland back into it, let Portland take a lead again, and Zach LaVine twice in this game didn't get shots off at the end of quarters and was just passing the ball. Portland just started pushing the pace, generating matchups they liked and exploiting those. And that's how they got the lead back to end the third quarter. The fourth quarter was not a fun one to watch defensively, because it It was DeMar DeRozan getting scorched defensively, and then DeMar DeRozan coming down on the other end and hitting shots. So, I mean, he was kind of offsetting, I guess. Anthony Simons hit 2 early threes that were off DeMar not playing much defense. But then you have DeMar coming down, hits 2 middies, then hits a 3 that then got changed to a 2, of course. We had that funny moment of Valanciunas sending Shaedon Sharpe flying. It didn't really seem like all that much. Like, it was a foul, don't get me wrong. But Sharpe just went like flying. It felt a little excessive. I don't know. It didn't seem like Valanciunas did that much. But they didn't call a foul. It went out of bounds. Portland challenges proximate foul and gets the foul call. Then Sabonis came back into the game. He came into the game, immediately gets a rebound, kicks it out to LaVine for 3. At that point, Kings were down 2. But then Sabonis picks up his 5th foul on a moving screen. Just a really weak call. There were so many weak calls against Sabonis, and Doug Christie just decided not to challenge any of them. But you had DeMar getting a tough and 1. Sabonis was fighting for his life inside with 5 fouls, trying to defend and rebound alone, and he was doing a great job of that, but it would have been nice if he had some help. And then Sabonis fouled out, going for an offensive rebound. And it was a clear foul on Sabonis, that one. And that's the one Doug Christie challenged. And so that's where, just like, this is why we should have used that challenge earlier on one of the weaker calls, not waiting until he finally fouls out on what was actually a foul. But there's two sides to it. There's two sides to it where, yeah, I think a lot of the calls on Sabonis were pretty weak, especially what other guys were getting away with. But also, Sabonis can't be fouling out of games where almost all of his fouls come on the offensive end of the floor. Like, yes, his offensive rebounding is super important, and yes, his screening is super important, and he's gonna take some fouls, but like he can't foul out like that. So that was really gonna test Valanciunas. He comes in the game, but things didn't really go well. Zach LaVine couldn't stay in front of anybody. I mean, Monk couldn't stay in front of anybody. DeMar couldn't stay in front of anybody. You can't play those 3 guys together. They can't stay in front of anybody. DeMar hit a midi, but Simons responded with a big 3 to go up 5, and then Monk just made an awful pass, trying to feed it into Valanciunas. And that's where Malik just has to be better with the ball. Shaedon Sharpe missed a wide open 3. That would have been the dagger, so we got lucky there in transition. But then Zach LaVine just came down, chucked a really tough 3 and missed it. And Ayton came down and hit a midi. And that's where it felt like it was pretty much over. It wasn't quite yet, but the Kings offense down the stretch really was just either get it to DeMar in the mid post and he'll score, or we're just going to kind of do a whole bunch of nothing and maybe Zach LaVine takes a tough shot or Monk makes a rough pass. We did put Lyles in for an offensive possession at the 5 for Valanciunas, and DeMar hits a 3 and we're only down 4. And then Trey Lyles plays some amazing defense at the rim, going straight up. But it felt like the perfect way for this game to kind of end because it encapsulated how the whole game went, where Toumani Camara crashes from the corner right by DeMar, who's just standing there watching, not boxing out, and he gets in there and gets the rebound, and the Kings foul, and then Simons hits a 3. So it was just another moment of great rim protection. Like, we had a game where Sabonis and Lyles, they came up with big moments protecting the rim, and then nobody else was rebounding. So I really hope Jake LaRavia is going to come in here and give us that size and rebounding that we're hoping for and that hustle, because it did feel like Portland came up with a lot of loose balls in this game. That's why I think LaRavia is a great fit. But at the same time, it's not going to matter a whole bunch if we're not playing him, if we're not playing Keon Ellis enough. Keon Ellis played 24 minutes. I mean, that's a fair amount of minutes, but for what this team needs, he should probably be playing more. Because when I think about what the Kings were doing down the stretch, and I think about how DeMar DeRozan was just cooking them, then it's like, okay, then you have Malik Monk and Zach LaVine sitting there doing nothing, and I understand their threats from the 3-point line. That's great, but so is Keon Ellis. And it feels like Monk and LaVine were kind of just taking touches away from DeMar, rather than being positives offensively as well. Like, there comes a point where you just don't need as many offensive players. Like, yeah, it's great if you can have all guys that can do something with the ball, that can shoot, put it on the floor, like that's great. But there's like diminishing returns as you have more of them out there. So I just think that Doug Christie has to make tough decisions here and actually play the guys that are going to win the games down the stretch, not just your 5 most talented guys. Going through some of the individual stat lines, we have Domantas Sabonis, 29 minutes with the foul trouble, 10 points, 14 rebounds, 4 turnovers. Probably all those turnovers were the offensive fouls. He only had 4 assists, and he had like 3 assists last game. The team combined for 21 assists. The assist numbers are just way down these past 2 games. And so Sabonis hasn't gotten easy looks inside, and he also hasn't been racking up the assists himself because it seems like the Kings aren't playing as well off him right now. DeMar, 22 points, 9 for 16 from the field. I don't think I really need to say too much else about him. 7 assists, 0 turnovers. He had 3 blocks somehow and a steal. 3 blocks and a steal. That's why defensive statistics do not tell a very good story of what a guy was doing on defense, because my God, was he horrible. He showed up in the fourth quarter scoring wise, and he's going to be the man down the stretch for this Kings team. There's no doubt about that. But he's just got to play some more defense. He's got to put a body on a guy when the shot goes up. Like, he just has to give something defensively. Keegan, 12 points, 7 rebounds, 5 for 10 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3. His shot was looking so nice. When Katie was talking about it on the broadcast after he missed 2 shots, how nice his shot was looking. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't the only one. Like, his shot is looking good, but he needs more. The Kings need to be able to just generate more 3-point shots. They shot 33s to Portland's 40, and Portland made 16, Kings made 10. You have to get up more than 33s. You brought in Zach LaVine, a better 3-point shooter. Get up more threes. Zach LaVine went 8 for 19 from the field for 22 points, 3 for 9 from 3. But I don't think he had a good defensive game. Felt like he was getting blown by on every closeout. It also felt like he wasn't really fitting into the offense. It felt like he got some points, kind of doing his own thing, not within the flow of the offense. There were some times in transition getting the ball in the flow of the offense, but he's got to find more ways to score within the offense. And there were, like I talked about, the catch and shoot threes. Like, that's perfect. But then a lot of the other buckets, it just kind of felt like he was trying to do stuff alone. And then Monk, 21 points, 4 assists, 7 rebounds, 8 for 20 from the field. It was an okay game. I don't think he was all that great defensively, but I think he probably was the best out of our perimeter players defensively, not counting Keegan. It's just kind of weird watching Monk play right now, because I feel like we just haven't totally figured out everyone's role. And so it feels like we are like spamming this Monk Sabonis pick and roll 2-man game, but it hasn't given the same results that we've seen in the past. And so look, that's where the coaching staff needs to come together and figure this out, and the players need to come together. When you have a day off now, that's the thing, right? You had to play back-to-back games. It is weird that the trade deadline is just like in the middle of the season when there is an all-star break, and they used to have it at all-star weekend, and we saw DeMarcus Cousins get traded at all-star weekend, which I think is why they stopped that. But honestly, I feel like that's better than this. But I feel like these first 2 losses, like, this is all the excuse you get. Now you have to figure it out. Like, there's no excuses at this point in the season when you're 51 games in and you're below 500 right now. Like, you just have to figure it out now. Off the bench, you had Keon playing 24 minutes and having a very solid game and playing well defensively, chipping in 7 points and, of course, going 1 for 2 from 3. Valanciunas in his debut went 2 for 8 from the field, 6 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Definitely felt like we didn't totally know how to use him offensively. But I think he was a good screen setter. Defensively, the main thing he's going to give you is just a guy that can bang down low and grab rebounds. He's not going to be great in space, but I feel like you can see the potential of what he's going to give us. Lyles just didn't really do all that much in this game. He had 14 minutes. There were some really interesting bench lineups that we were throwing out there, but Lyles, now playing the 4, did come in for the final minute or two playing the 5, but Trey had an overall pretty quiet game. And then Devin Carter, pretty much already touched on him. Pretty rough offensively. He's going to give you some things defensively, but yeah, offensively, he can't figure it out right now. And that's why you need to go out into the buyout market. Go get a point guard. You can't rely on a rookie right now. Now the Kings come into an interesting stretch. You have New Orleans, Dallas, then New Orleans, then New Orleans. So that's very interesting. Playing New Orleans 3 times within the span of pretty much a week. But the Kings have an easier schedule coming up here. I mean, New Orleans 3 times. You have Golden State, you have Charlotte, you have Utah. This is where they have to win games. Right now, you've kind of started off this easier stretch of games against Orlando and Portland, even though Portland's super hot right now. But you've started that off 0 for 2. So now you're coming into much more winnable games. You got to get revenge against New Orleans here. You sweep New Orleans this season. You won that first game. It's going to be a Jonas Valanciunas revenge game. We'll see. I bet Jake LaRavia probably will play in this game. But we just got to be able to guard Trey Murphy. I mean, Trey Murphy is the key. This guy's looking like a future all-star this season. He's been insane. He's lit us up a million times. So I'm sure Kings fans, you know all about him. But hopefully we can just see more flow offensively, faster ball movement, less of the ball just sticking. Guys looking like they know what they're doing and doing it with a purpose. And hopefully we can get our first efficient Zach LaVine game. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back to recap the game against New Orleans. So I will see you guys then. Peace.